This event, I think, is just a signal to me that the mega caps have so much conviction in this event, in AI right now, that all of them, from Meta to Microsoft to Alphabet to Oracle too, which I would consider a mega cap, they're right there. They all are investing everything they can in AI. And I think that's the big takeaway, is that whatever you thought they could invest, they're going to find ways to invest even more if they think that they can monetize it.
Welcome to DeepTech. That's Doug Clinton. I'm Gene Munster, and our topic today came pretty natural. Doug, you and I had the opportunity to go to Squawk Box's 30th anniversary last night. Really cool to think about what they've done. Joe Kernan, been there for 30 years. I mean, blows me away that
From the beginning.
it's like somebody talk about job commitment to a job. It's quite admirable. And not only Joe and the crew were there, but just I'd say a lot of notable investors. And not surprising, the A topic, of course, was what's your take on Oracle? Where are we at in the AI trade? In some ways, it feels like we're living Groundhog's Day on this question about where are we relative to how far do we have to go in AI. I think kind of the edges change around it. Oracle, I'd say, is kind of a newer player in that conversation. But I wanted to start there and just rewind a couple days and get your reaction to the Oracle news.
I mean, epic. I don't know how else you could describe it when you have a company that big with that big of a sort of change from a price standpoint, right? Up 35%, almost $1 trillion company. It's incredible. And it reminded me a little bit, if you kind of rewind back with Nvidia back in 2023, when they had, I think it was their, if I remember, it was maybe their July quarter. It was in the summer. Where they had the step function. It was like, they guided up. I think the expectations were for like 7 or 8 billion the next quarter, and they guided to 11 or 12, if I remember off the top of my head. And everybody was like, wow, like what is going on? And the answer was AI. I mean, that was kind of, aside from ChatGPT hitting, about 6 months earlier, that was really, I think, the breakout sort of event for AI in the stock market for the current run. This event, I think, is just a signal to me that the mega caps have so much conviction in this event, in AI right now, that all of them, from Meta to Microsoft to Alphabet to Oracle too, which I would consider a mega cap, they're right there. They all are investing everything they can in AI. And I think that's the big takeaway, is that whatever you thought they could invest, they're going to find ways to invest even more if they think that they can monetize it in the long run.
I want to have a little bit of fun with numbers here. Is that I'm going to round? Is that Oracle's market cap appreciated by about 250 billion, following what essentially was a target on 2030. We can talk more about that, like the substance of what they said. That is similar. You mentioned that Nvidia kind of breakout. They had a day where it was up about the same, 250 billion. And do you want to guess the other one in the last couple years that had a $250 billion of the mega cap breakout day?
$250 billion day. I'd have to say Nvidia, but I'm not confident.
So we had Nvidia. Nvidia was one of them, then
Okay.
Oracle, but the third one was Apple. After
Apple, wow.
people kind of got, I think, some more confidence in terms of what was going on with.
And that's a 10% move for them. That's the funny thing, right?
10% move,
magnitude is,
as a percentage,
so
this
big.
was unprecedented, but from like a dollar perspective. But the point is that what happened with Oracle, we have all this news that comes out, and it's every week we have to kind of process something more and some big announcement around AI. But this Oracle thing really stands out, is my point, that it is one of those that we're going to probably get 1 or 1.5 of these kind of per year, and we got to make some sense out of it. And so just wanted to put some context around that and kind of add to that. I agree with you about that. The confidence is inspiring that these large companies have in the outcome. There's a question I want to have around like groupthink, but before we get to that, that confidence, the part that surprised me was it was really on guidance for almost like a 2030 number So this
Mhm.
again is OpenAI is the big customer. OpenAI doesn't have $300 billion or $60 billion a year to spend with Oracle. They've got their revenue right now is about 10 billion per year. So they got to find a way to get that revenue going. It's growing. It'll double more, probably more than double next year. But there's a gap there. And so like this is really in our world, we've done this for a long time. In our world, for a company, most companies give quarterly guidance. Some companies give quarterly guidance and then occasionally give annual guidance. And then back in the day when we had Analyst Day, you might get a 3-year plan of some rough
Yeah.
numbers, but a 5-year target that was so specific, like just the detail around that kind of caught my attention. Like, there's no way they can have clarity on this.
No, I mean, the 144 billion, I think, is the number that they put out for 2030 around this. I mean, it's gonna be wrong. It might be higher than that, right? Or it might
Right.
be lower, obviously. But I think it at least gives you a sense of where their heads are at. And I think, like, bigger picture,
So,
there's like an even more important takeaway to me with what Oracle was saying, but also like all of the mega caps, the commentary on CapEx, the confidence in AI, which is like we've talked a lot about the internet as the comparison, right? The guidebook for
mhm.
what's going to happen in the AI boom. But we've also, and more recently, we've been really, I think, debating more about this. It's like there are things that are different. And so, like, what's different now versus the 90s? And for those differences, how does that matter? Like, how is that going to shape what happens in the market? I actually think one of the biggest things that's different now versus the 90s is that you have essentially, 9, 10 of the world's biggest companies all willing to invest hundreds of billions of dollars in this technology. You didn't have that in the 90s. There were no mega cap tech companies, right? There was, I
Mhm.
mean, Oracle was still around then, ironically, so was Microsoft. But none of them were talking about the scale of investment into the internet that we're talking about right now. And the conviction wasn't the same. I think those companies certainly believed the internet was going to be really big. And if you read, there was a book that was about Larry Ellison and kind of took you through the history of Oracle called Software. It's this awesome book because Ellison's such a great character. But like he had supreme confidence in like what was going to happen with the internet. And he was dead right in retrospect. And I think you're kind of seeing the same thing here is he is willing to bet the farm on AI and given his track record, I think he's going to be right. But I do think that's something that's really different is you have really big companies that are investing a ton of money, have access to a ton of capital. And that is different than the internet era.
And if I would just want to take more of the skeptic view, I think it's healthy to do this, is that that's true. There's this capital that we haven't had invested before, hundreds of billions of dollars a year, that didn't happen 25 years ago. But why does that necessarily mean that this is ultimately going to meet or exceed the high expectations? Like I have a
Well,
hard time filling that in.
yeah, it might not. I mean, that's the thing is, and what happened with the internet, right? Eventually, the near term expectations got so high and so much was priced in, there was almost nothing that could happen even over the next decade to sort of justify, even though the next 2 decades, I think certainly has justified all the excitement that we had about the internet in the 90s. So in the long run, the market was right. It just pulled forward too much of the
Hmm.
future. And I think that's also the existing question with AI is at what point are we pulling too much of the future forward? And you
Hmm.
mentioned 5-year target. I mean, now we're really talking about some future numbers here with Oracle. I don't think we've pulled, an egregious amount of the future forward yet. We're probably starting to pull a little bit of it. But if you talk about revenue for OpenAI, you mentioned, kind of 12, I think, billion run rate was the last number. I think they're thinking they can exit the year at maybe 20,
Hmm.
but they've also got some projections out there online. I think the information posted some of this. If I remember, they're projecting revenue in 2030 of north of $100 billion. And so they think they've got a
So
really
it's
fast
basically
ramp and that
12
could support
today,
some of this.
25, basically almost doubling every year,
Yep.
close to that.
Something
Uh,
like that. Yeah.
that's some huge growth. I want to maybe give an answer to my own question too. When I think about this massive investment, and tell me if this makes sense, is I think of all the investment that's going in is almost like building the hardware brain of AI, and they need to have the um, almost like the application layer, the models on top of it.
Mhm.
But the brain, the hardware part is going to be so juicy that innovation's going to, on the native AI side is just going to be absorbed into it and create applications that will change our lives. So now that argument rhymes with what I remember 25 years ago, and Cisco was building a bunch of routers, and
Yeah.
the view was the pipes are so big, like eventually this has to happen. So, and then of course we had what we had from 2000, 2005. Is that does that pass like the? You're so good with like the technical side of things. Does that simplistic view pass the sniff test about why this investment is so important from the big players?
Well, I think that that might also get into one of the other things that I think is different, right? Where when we talk about building out the internet infrastructure, there is a, I think, fairly tangible and finite, at least in retrospect, reality to that, right? Where it's like with the internet, once you kind of get everybody connected, at least the
Hmm.
way it was back then, and then you obviously get into the bandwidth question and how that evolved over time. But once you kind of get, everybody who kind of wanted it connected, you've built your infrastructure, right? And then you don't need to continue to invest in this, up and to the right sort of exponential curve. With intelligence, like that's the thing that I don't think we know yet. Like there's no, I don't know if there is a finite demand for intelligence. Like what is the finite demand for intelligence? I'm not sure what the answer is. There's probably a number somewhere, but that is much more of an abstract question than how many people need to be connected to the internet, right? Because your
What's
max
their
number is
bandwidth?
literally everybody. Your max number of connections for the internet is like, okay, once you got everybody
Right,
connected, like there's your absolute ceiling. I'm not quite sure what the absolute ceiling is for intelligence because it makes everything better, right?
right.
And so I think that's one of the things where it's like, we're not going to know that. We can't answer that question right now. What we do know is that these model providers keep saying that they are constrained, right? Demand is
Mhm.
there, the capacity is not there. And so we haven't hit that number yet.
Probably worth noting too, some of that guidance from OpenAI, some of it came from overflow, a small portion of it, probably 10-15%, where you've got Meta, excuse me, Amazon and Microsoft and Google not being able to keep up. And that's another kind of layer on top of this confidence piece around Oracle is just it underscores that just the intensity that uh, companies are wanting to get a hold of this capacity and not wanting to wait around to do it, not waiting for all three of those the last 3 quarters. Every time they've said their growth numbers on their cloud, and they said that it would have been better, of course, if they had more capacity. But that's just a sign that dogs are eating the dog food in a way that I haven't seen for a long time. So that kind of also stuck out with me from the Oracle piece. Is Oracle, is it actually going to be an AI company?
I think they certainly want to be. I think their actions speak to the opportunity that they see. And I mean, I'll go back to what we were just saying about Ellison a minute ago. Like, I mean, he's 80 years old now. I think he's 81. I,
Whoa,
I
I
heard
didn't know that.
he's incredible. He's a legend, and he's been so right and so I think influential for so long in the tech world. He obviously sees something, right? Because he is certainly backing this, on board with this, championing
Mhm.
this. I would imagine internally, and so
Yeah, he's
when you
got to
see
be.
someone like that, right, like betting on this, he obviously sees a pattern in his head that he's recognized before. And so, I mean, I
Mhm.
think he certainly wants them to be an AI company. And the way that they're going to do it, they're not going to be a model builder. That's not what they do. And maybe they can obviously provide data infrastructure in different ways, but the cloud services and helping with the model training, I believe, is what they're focused on here in this case. And I imagine they'll also get an inference that would make them an AI company.
How does their history, the stuff around OpenAI and Oracle, that to me feels like they're trying to build a competitor to AWS, and but yet they have all this database data, and how does that benefit them down the road? Is there an angle where they can have like a unique play here?
I would think. I mean, I'm not an expert on Oracle. That's it's not a company we've ever covered.
Mhm.
But my highest level thought would be, their understanding of on-prem. could be a real advantage for them. I mean, that's really the world that they came from, and they've kind of had to adapt and adopt the cloud world that's been pushed into the ecosystem now that really wasn't what they were built for. And I wonder, as we've talked about, like, okay, cloud has been great in sort of this, smartphone, high bandwidth internet era, but is cloud going to be the optimal solution as we move into the AI era, where organizations in particular might be a little bit more careful about how they want to share data with some of these model providers? They might want to keep a lot of their data on-prem for security or even regulatory reasons in the case of finance or health. And so that might be something that Oracle can really benefit from, is say, hey, we also understand on-prem. If you want a cloud solution, we can help you there. If you want on-prem, we can do that too.
So let's go through the fallout from the Oracle. I think from one perspective, is it just reminds me how early we are. The reality is that these large businesses can come out of nowhere. That's kind of an easy takeaway. I mentioned a few months ago, I said we're in the third inning. And then after the last earnings call, I said we're in the second inning. And now I'm debating if we're in the first inning. Kind of some fun with math here. If you look at first inning of baseball, the second inning of baseball, uh, 2 divided by 9 is like 22 or 28%. I forget what the number is of the 20%. That's if you look at the percentage of daily active chat GPT versus
Yep.
daily active search, it's right around 25%, the same number. So, I mean, fun with math, angling into or how early we are. But that was one easy takeaway is we're a lot earlier. We saw a little bit of a move here. Think about other people that benefit from Nvidia. Obviously, like they're going to be one of the big beneficiaries. I think shares in Nvidia were up like 3% on the news, and that one
Yeah.
surprised me a little bit. It feels like after their earnings, it still is having a hard time, at least the stock, and getting out of its way. And it still feels like there's this wall of worry from investors that we're hearing from Oracle about how much they need their chips, but at the same time, Nvidia stock just doesn't have the appropriate reaction. Do you get that same sense?
Well, I think there's another ingredient to the story too, which is, okay, so we just had Oracle and on earnings talk about this huge forward number. And then after earnings, I believe the
Mhm.
story came out that it was OpenAI, not really a big
Right.
surprise. But we actually had the same thing happen a week ago with Broadcom, where Broadcom said that they had a really big new XPU customer, so for their custom silicon. And right after those
That's
earnings,
right.
the story came out that OpenAI was that customer too. Again, probably not a surprise. But I think that piece of it may be muting a little bit what you're talking about. And this is something that at Deepwater we've been talking about since earlier this year, where we've had this thesis that eventually, and I think we thought it was going to happen this year, and maybe now this is what is happening. Eventually, the story was going to shift from GPU demand to custom silicon demand. And the thesis behind that, at least from my perspective, is, and we've been saying this, any company that is $100 billion valued AI company, I think has to develop their own silicon. Because if you're trying to be a real player, I think you do at some point need to have your own hardware architecture to maximize your chances of having, super low cost inference largely. Google
Because
obviously is the
because
pioneer.
Nvidia is so expensive?
Well, just because of the dynamics of using, right, these custom chips, of using these XPUs, as Broadcom likes to call them, when you're sort of embedding some of the process that you need to handle in the hardware, that just makes it naturally more cost efficient. It makes it more energy efficient to run these models than otherwise. And so when you're running these massive data centers and processing a ton of inference, if you can do a lot of that work through your own custom silicon, you should be able to bring down your costs, right, to run those models. And so that's it. I mean, it's just simply a function, not that Nvidia doesn't make a great chip, they make a phenomenal chip, but definitionally their chips are general purpose. They're not supposed to be specifically designed for one model or one use case, where if you know what your use case is, if you kind of know what your model needs to do, and you can build that into your chip, you can reduce your costs. And so if you're running at scale, I think you do have to think about that.
Okay. I remember having conversations with, I'm not going to say the companies, but one of the hyperscalers that was about a year ago, and they were doing its internal investments into their own custom silicon and to outside custom silicon. And it felt like the message was it's still clear that NVIDIA is the best bang for the buck. Now, things can
Mhm.
change a lot in a year, but when I look at the Broadcom news and understand their guidance is their guidance, they're hearing something from OpenAI that they want to do this. But to me, there's still this disconnect between wanting to do it. I mean, that's the right approach. Just like you said, if you're more than 100 billion, you're going to want to do this. But just
Mhm.
the reality isn't silicon. I remember you mentioning like to build silicon, you don't sip CapEx, you chug it.
Mhm.
And
You do.
like, why does ultimately do these companies need to be in the custom silicon business? Just let NVIDIA create the still the best bang for your buck.
But you can be best bang for your buck, but not the most absolute efficient bang for your buck.
But
You know
isn't
what I mean?
efficiency
That
part of the bang for the buck?
if you're considering all in, right? So if you're running, if you're just trying to provide generalized data center services, NVIDIA is your best bang for your buck, 100%. But if you have a very specific use case, if you have a very specific model, right, that you're trying to run, then the best bang for your buck would be a chip that's optimized to run for that use case or that model. And that's the difference between the two. I don't think that using XPUs is in any way saying that NVIDIA chips aren't good because they're still the best. They're still the best general purpose chips. Nobody else is even close. I don't think anybody will ever get close, at least not in the next 3 to 5 years. But these chips are custom built to do something specific. And so they're apples and oranges is the easiest way that I could kind of explain it. And I think you're going to see these companies use both. But really, what matters more than that, I think, is the narrative, right? Like that's what we were kind of saying about at the beginning of the year. Eventually, the narrative is going to shift. It may
Right.
not really impact NVIDIA's numbers a ton, but it's almost like Google and OpenAI, where like now there's this story out there, at least, of XPUs and how much ultimately are Amazon, who's got a really big, right, custom silicon business with Trainium and Inferentia, Google, the biggest of all, OpenAI now with a $10 billion contract, Meta has played around with custom chips. I mean, they're all doing it. And so now it begs this question of will this at some point shift anything from NVIDIA or could it actually just grow in parallel and maybe not even hit NVIDIA that much? That's the question that we have to wrestle with.
Do we know with Amazon and Google and Microsoft with their chips, are they actually like producing at scale? It's my understanding they're still more or less testing these chips.
No, I mean, Google's been at scale with TPUs for a while. I don't know how to quantify that. I do know that Amazon has talked about pretty significant workloads now running on Inferentia. And so it seems like they're at scale. Obviously, OpenAI is just starting to figure it out. I think Meta is probably very much in the figure it out camp. I think Microsoft's, if I recall, this was some news from several months ago. I don't think their first efforts in chips went super well. And so I think they're still really early, but I would say Google certainly is using the at scale and Amazon is probably right behind them.
And if we look at NVIDIA's revenue, the top six customers accounted for 63% of business in the July quarter. And if you look at the hyperscalers, Meta kind of jumped up as like 23% of revenue, but the rest, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, they're all kind of in that 10 to 15% range. And so they're still spending a ton. And so when it comes to custom silicon, they may be implementing at scale, but the reality is they're moving in parallel right now. I mean, they're spending more and more with NVIDIA and they're spending more and more with themselves. And I guess the bottom line question is at some point is the spending on themselves with their custom going to have a negative impact on NVIDIA? And the answer is your answer is eventually it will. Is that what I'm hearing?
If you zoom out long enough, I mean, the answer is yeah,
Right.
probably. I
How
don't
about the
think
next
it.
two
I don't think
years?
you ever. Um, I
Like, will
would
you
think
see
only
it in NVIDIA?
marginally
Margin.
at best in the next 2 years would be my guess.
Which
Yeah.
okay, so then I wanna bring into that
But
piece.
well, let me say this though. Like if you're Google or if you're Amazon, the two leaders that we're talking about here, and you're trying to build broad purpose cloud infrastructure, because all the cloud investment is not just for AI and it's not just for their AI workloads. It's also for other AI workloads. You have to use NVIDIA chips too, right? Like you have to have the general purpose chips and also your custom chips. I think the big question though is like, what does the mix between those look like? And so just to be clear, it's like there's not a world where all of a sudden NVIDIA is selling no chips to one of these two companies. That
Right.
just, I don't think that's ever going to happen, certainly
Agree.
in the foreseeable future. But I think the question is just what is the makeup of that? And I don't think it really will affect them in the next couple of years though.
It's what's the impact of custom on that incremental growth? Is it 30% growth, 35, like custom silicon? If it just touches that kind of that edge of that growth rate, investors are gonna get spooked, and that's the conversation that's orbiting around here. Not this conversation specifically, but over NVIDIA over the past couple weeks. And my sense is that they're both going to happen at the same time, but NVIDIA will still beat their numbers. And come back to what Zuckerberg said at the White House. So I'm going to go through his numbers. He said by 2028 they'll invest 600 billion dollars. Now, next year, and Meta said that they're going to raise their capex by about 47%, 26 over 25. And if you fill in what 23 and 24 has already been spent, consider that kind of part of Zuckerberg's overall comments, and layer in Susan Lee. I think she's at the Goldman conference at the beginning of the month and talked about, put some context around Zuckerberg's comments that, this is more broad investment, not just CapEx, but my guess is the majority of it is probably CapEx. You come out to growth rates in Meta's CapEx of, call it, I'm going to round here, 50% next year. And then it goes to like 40 and 35%, rough numbers. Still like really high growth through 2028. We go and look at what Amazon, Microsoft, and Google are saying about 2026. None of them have had these big numbers like Zuckerberg threw out recently, but they're generally, those three on average are looking for their CapEx to go up by 7% next year.
Mhm.
So you have this like crazy. I mean, they're not, if it's 7% next year and that's the real number, then it's 4% in 27.
Yeah.
But you have, how do you make sense of this? Like the commentary, one of two things is going to happen. Meta's just going to run away with the CapEx spend, or the other three got to play catch up.
And the answer may slightly be in the middle, where I think as part of that dinner that you referenced, where Zuckerberg mentioned these numbers, I believe there was a hot mic incident where he said to President Trump, "I wasn't sure what numbers you wanted me to go with." So, I'm not sure how solid these numbers are, but they're probably directionally correct. I don't think he would say it if they didn't have big plans to invest. So maybe the numbers aren't quite as
I didn't pick
high
up on
in
that
terms
hot
of the.
mic piece.
Yeah, there was, but I mean, again, like I said, they may be the real numbers, or maybe they're a little lower. I doubt that they're 7%. I doubt they're single digits, like you just talked about for some of the hyperscalers.
Right.
And so let's say that they're, directionally right. They're going to be strong double digits. My guess is, Google and Amazon, the numbers that people have out there for them are probably too low. I don't know if they're 20% too low or
Mhm.
or more than that, but it's hard to believe that they would cede ground to Meta at that much of a delta. And we know
Right.
Zuckerberg's going to be aggressive. I mean, that's what he does when he sees these things, whether he's right or wrong. And he's been right and he's been wrong. He was certainly right about social. He was right about mobile. He was wrong about the metaverse, but he's not going to shy away from investing in AI.
Just to put some modeling around the conversation, is that if you again look at basically 2/3 of Nvidia's business comes from the big companies. Therefore, if you just look at what the big companies are saying about CapEx, that's going to be a really good read. We've always known that, but now it's like as customer concentration has been increasing with Nvidia, it's even more clear that you got to look at those numbers. And if you assume kind of at the current rate where there's a 7% increase from Google, Microsoft, and Amazon, and Meta's up 47%, and then you can put a growth rate of about 30% on the rest of their business, you get to a 31%. That's where the street's at right now for next year. I didn't even look at where the street numbers were. I did the exercise first. It came out to be the same number. So it was a good kind of back check. If you say that the three, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, those three move to 47% next year. So just take it to the extreme that they're the same as Meta. Then Nvidia's growth is in the low 40%, like 43%. So what does that mean? We probably got a pretty good sense of where Nvidia's growth is going to be for next year, top line. It's for calendar 26. It's probably somewhere in that 30 to 43%. It's unlikely that it's going to be 60%. And it's also unlikely that it's going to be 20%. And so this idea that we're just going to hit the wall, I feel like that's still out there. I think that just the gears that are in motion here, it'd be hard to have an outcome much different than that 30 to 45%. After Oracle's comments, I'm leaning more towards the 43% growth, but just kind of want to put some color around some of those numbers.
Makes sense. I think we're on the same page. It's whether it's second inning, third inning, early fourth at the latest. I mean, it's still well before the middle of everything that's going to happen here in this cycle. And I think we're starting to get to the point where more people are talking about the concept of a bubble, and they think things are crazy. Things aren't really that crazy, in my opinion. One of the reasons is because of what we were just saying a minute ago, which is the thing that's different this time is you've got trillion-dollar companies investing hundreds of billions of dollars a year. They can afford to do it still, mostly funding it from from free cash flow. Right now, we're starting to get into a little bit of balance sheet investment, and I know Meta's taking out some debt. But I mean, it's not like this is all venture dollar fueled like we had in the dot-com era. And so, that's just another tailwind for more companies to come out and invest in building on the hyperscalers.
Let's talk about a trillion-dollar company that is investing not hundreds of billions, but tens of billions of dollars, more like 15 billion. That, of course, is Apple. Mark Gurman, I mean, I don't know how this guy does it. Like, I remember the days when Apple was like this fortress where you couldn't get any edge or read in terms of what was going to be announced. You just were using your instincts around where their products should go and guess what was happening. I mean, he basically tells you everything we need to know a week before the event. So from like a product perspective, everything was as expected. I think there were some other announcements that he was expecting that weren't as important that we'll probably see in the weeks to come. But the substance around the iPhones was there. We got to see what they all look like for the first time, which there's some value in that because then you get a sense about how they're going to sell. But I want to focus on the AI piece because at the very end of the event, right when the event ended, the stock dropped 1%. And
which is typical, right? I remember
it's typical,
every year you kind of get to sell the news.
People were there, there was some news that they were hoping to hear. And at first I thought it was around pricing, that they edged up the pricing a little bit by changing some configurations. But for the most part, pricing was relatively stable. I think there's a lot of room that Apple has when it comes to pricing. But then the piece around AI, that they didn't at least reiterate that we're going to see something. Now, my expectation was they weren't going to say anything. This was not the time for them to talk about AI. That's a sore topic. And they did the right thing by not talking about it. But I think that the market still wanted to hear, at a minimum, we're thrilled to show you what we're all doing, all the exciting stuff we're doing around Siri early next year. So Gurman's got it in March is when he's expecting it. I think it's probably prudent to put a little bit of buffer in there and say we'll get the new Siri by WWDC, which would be early June of next year. And my question is, at the end of the day, has anybody, this idea that Apple is just behind in AI, is that the reality of it? Because they haven't had this breakout growth that AWS and Azure and OpenAI has had? Or are they doing just great because they're a consumer device company and nothing has happened that has really captured the consumer's imagination when it comes to AI?
The fairest characterization it does come back to Siri, which is obviously a sore point for them. And that is that OpenAI and now, right, Grok, Gemini, they all have these voice-enabled AI interfaces that you can talk to, and they can basically do what everybody, I think, for years has wished Siri was. And so I think that they have, to an extent, you have to say they've missed on that, right? Because there shouldn't be anything that has held them back over the last 2 years
I see
from
what you're
figuring
saying.
out
So
what these companies who have much less in terms of resources have all done with voice
they miss
interface.
that's the context that Siri's a chatbot, and they
Mhm.
missed the chatbot.
They have, and it doesn't mean that they are never going to have an AI product. And to your point about Gurman's story, I think the smartest thing they could do is probably partner with, whether it's Google or somebody else, to handle the AI side. I don't know that there's anything that they can do in terms of building a model that would be unique or additive versus what
Right.
we already have out there. I think they've missed that boat. They probably could have built their own model, if they really wanted to, and they started like a year and a half ago, but it feels like they have probably missed that boat too. I don't know if that matters. At the end of the day, it might not matter. The only thing I would say, though, is if they do end up partnering with Google or someone else, we do have a historical thing we can look at there too, which is Google Maps was the partner, a great partner early on for iPhone. And then, Android came out. If I recall, Steve Jobs was never super happy about that competition with Google as a search partner and the Maps partner. And then ultimately they launched Apple Maps. And so there is tension between these companies, right? They do compete on a lot of fronts. That's the only thing that, could that
Mhm.
ever blow up on them? Probably not, but I think that's the best case, or sort of the best course they still have to have good AI on the phone.
Let's go back to the idea that like Siri and they missed Siri and they missed the chatbot. That's what happened. Statement of fact. But I think Apple is just so much more than Siri. And it is I think it's like, I don't know what the right analogy is, but missing on a position, a baseball team, one position isn't doing well. It doesn't mean the whole baseball team is uh, out to lunch. And it's obvious that they got to do more in AI, but I just want to do a gut check on that. Like, yes, they missed on Siri, but still, what the opportunity in AI is what I really want. Chatbot's great. I've got a great chatbot. I got multiple chatbots I use now. Happy with them. What I really want is AI just to be over all my data. This kind of view that Federini talked about after WWDC is I forgot the language he used around it, but the idea that Apple can kind of work on your data. That's been the long hope around Apple Intelligence. But to me, that's something that's powerful. I can't believe I use Apple Notes. By the way, Apple Notes is just like the usage has
Awful.
gone through the roof over
The
the last few
product's
years.
so bad. The search on it is awful. But yes,
It,
I use it
I
too.
don't even think it's.
It's
I don't
great.
even know if we almost need to create a new word that's better than awful and horrible. Like add something that maybe it's Apple Notes is like, but like I can write a note and then I can search immediately for some text in that note and it won't show up.
It won't show us. Yes.
So
Yeah.
um,
Maddening.
yeah, maddening. But I mean, that's the kind of the Las Vegas mentality here. Like, if they just pull that lever, like something so basic where you just ask and it goes through all of your junk and helps you find what you're looking for. Like, just that alone would be, I think, an unlock for people, for consumers about how they use tech. And Apple's in a great position to do that. And so, I think they got time. I am most concerned about what Johnny's going to do and on this other device, and we'll see. I think what they said, we'll show it next year. They'll show it to us next year, which probably means we actually can buy it in 2027. So I think that just also speaks to how much time, how slow the consumer's going. The biggest thing going in consumer right now is a foldable phone. And we were talking about that last night at the event, the foldable phone. And I don't know, I'm mixed on whether the world wants a foldable phone. We don't need to get into it now, but my point is, like, this is still, when it comes to consumer and AI, I think the field is just wide open.
Well, I think the biggest thing going right now in consumer is not a foldable phone. I think it's ChatGPT. I think that's way more important, just broadly to the consumer. For the phones, yes,
But
but I
yeah, I'm
think,
talking from like a
and
consumer
that to me
device
speaks to,
perspective. Like,
yeah,
what's
well, and
the
I
biggest
think, yeah, it's probably right. Yeah, it's not these pins. The AI devices so
mhm,
far have been underwhelming. But I
not
think,
Vision
I
Pro?
mean, the thing with Apple though is this: I think that we can believe two things that are not contradictory. They've missed AI so far. I think that is a statement of fact. I think they've been missing so far an opportunity on Siri to really revamp it early and probably be in the conversation with ChatGPT and Gemini and these other products, as like, no, like I just use Siri, right? Like the 700 million weekly active
Mhm,
users on ChatGPT, they could have won that. They could have won some part of that. Maybe they will still win in the future. And those are the two things we can, I think, believe that are not contradictory, that they've missed an opportunity so far, but the opportunity is not over yet. They still have a
mhm.
chance, and we'll see what they do. But I think there's a bigger picture thing too with Apple that is at least worth mentioning, where like I think they did miss the boat with Vision Pro. Like imagine a world where instead of spending all the time and resources they spent on Vision Pro, they were focusing on
Yeah,
Siri.
I
Wouldn't
was
that have
wrong
been
on
a
that.
better choice? Yeah, like I think, well, not that's not about you being wrong. Apple was wrong. I
Yeah,
think
I was
that was
wrong.
a tactical error. I think Apple made a tactical error. We've criticized Google in the past
Yep,
for errors they've made.
sure.
It's okay to criticize some of these companies and say, hey, look, I think that was probably a mistake. It doesn't mean that they're dead. Doesn't mean it's over. Hopefully going forward, they do get Siri right because they still do have a big opportunity there.
On the opportunity with Siri versus other chatbots, and I think taking friction, removing friction is such a big advantage when it comes to adoption. Think about what Google pays, the 20 billion a year that they pay. They pay to be a default in Safari. Now, that is a lot of friction to go in and change. For most people, I mean, it's like moving a mountain to go and change your
Yep.
default search provider from Google to DuckDuckGo. But when you think about pushing a button on your phone and Siri being summoned, my guess is they're not going to. Maybe you can change it so you push the button and GPT gets summoned. But that's a big deal, and I think people as angry as I am with Apple and their search, as much hate mail that they've gotten around Siri over the past decade, people will still give it a chance. And so I kind of come back to this idea that understand that Apple's growth rates, it's going to be the street's looking for 5% next year. I think it's probably going to be closer to 10, but it's nothing near what Meta's going to probably grow their advertising business 15-20% next year.
Mhm.
It's nothing
Smaller
near,
base, but yeah.
yep, nothing near what they're doing. But I still come back to this Google. We've changed our tune on Google. We were nervous about the impact of the chatbots. Now we're seeing like this idea they're making progress. They still have a huge culture issue. And the same with Apple. Like, yes, they haven't done it, but at the end of the day, people love their devices. They're going to stick with the iPhone, and they just got a great shot on it. So when I put it all together, I guess, want the record to be clear. I think that Apple's going to be, despite the fact that it's got a high multiple, despite the fact that it's got a low growth rate, I think the bar is so low on AI, and I think that they are so committed to getting it right. They're going to deliver that it's going to be the surprise in tech over the next year is going to be how awesome Apple and AI is.
The only thing I'll add to that, and I actually think this is really important. I do think now they do actually, I think, have to get it right. Like, I don't think they can mess it
Right.
up and then
Agreed.
try one more time. Like, this is kind of like, hey, show us or it's not there. And so it's going to be really interesting once they announce this and we have the event. We were talking about the stock being down after the event on Monday, right? It's going to be really interesting to see what the stock does after that AI event and whether people believe like, hey, they cracked it, or it's like, nope, that was not
Right.
compelling.
Yeah. Even if it trades up going into the event, no one's going to have full confidence that it's going to work until they see it. I
Yeah.
mean, just even you heard how positive I am. like, there's still this thing inside me, like, be careful. Like, this has
Yeah.
been a tough road for them. So when the bulls are saying be careful, that probably means that, yeah, they have to deliver. There's no doubt. I will say this: it will be a disaster if Siri flops, but
Yeah.
I still think they have more shots on net. People will blow them up. The stock will be down for a year, and then they'll come back and keep trying. They're not going to give up on this.
Yeah. The consumer might. That's my only
I don't know
worry
if they,
is
unless something
it's
else
hard
is
for
out
me. Like,
there.
I'm
It's
super skeptical, and
but
like, I would rather just use ChatGPT. It's going to be
oh,
hard for me to change my workflow. It
uh,
will. I think
let,
that's the missed opportunity.
let me ask you this: Siri's a flop. Do you shift off of Apple devices over the next couple years because of that?
Well, I've just turned off Siri, and when Siri like
Well,
pops in with my
agree.
earbuds, 90% of the time I'm just annoyed. It's like, no, like I'm answering it
Yeah,
angrily because it's like it's popping in at the wrong time. So it's
but
just like that's what, and
from
I think that's a common consumer perception right now with it because it has been so kind of
wh-
mediocre, and
what
so
I'm
I'll give it a chance, but I'm just skeptical.
give it a chance. What I'm kind of introducing is the idea that they actually the it would be a disaster if Siri flops, but I think they actually have multiple other shots on net to get it right
Yeah, see,
because.
I don't agree with that. I think you at some point consumers just give up
But where do they
on
go?
it. No, I'm not saying they give up on Apple. Let me be clear. I'm
Right,
saying they just don't do Siri. I'm saying
right.
Apple, someone can continue to use an Apple device and turn off Siri or avoid Siri.
But if as long as they have that button that you push, as long as that's the default, people are going to give it a shot.
No, I think they have one more. This is where you and I disagree. I think they have to get it right next year. For most people, you will always give it a shot. The average
I think,
consumer at some point will just say, no, I've had enough. I've had 5 years of Siri experiences and I'm done. The average person will say that.
well, to be continued. Let's leave it there. On behalf of DeepTech and what has been a fun roller coaster up and to the right type of a week. Bye for now.